the concept of a side hustle snowball, where you've itemized out your monthly expenses, and because everybody wants to like replace their rent, replace their mortgage, and like that's awesome. But could you start out by replacing your cell phone bill or your car payment or your insurance or your gym membership or your like Dollar Shave Club, or these little things that kind of add up? Like, could you erase those line item expenses with extra income? Could you make those free? That's really exciting for me. Like, as you kind of start to build your way up towards those.
Side hustles. These days, it's become a popular term that people are always seeming to throw out when it comes to money. Whether it's driving for a rideshare company, dog babysitting, buying and selling stuff from garage sales, the list continues to go on and changing every day. It's become a viable way to cover expenses and to make some extra cash for any range of things, whether it's Christmas shopping, covering bills, anything you might want. Nick Loper has championed and established himself as a somewhat king of the side hustles. The founder and brains behind SideHustleNation.com, Nick joined the podcast to talk about how you can start your side hustle, how to find the one that is just right for you, and much, much more. Making Your Money Work is a podcast all about giving you what you need to be successful and to help you live your best life. From budgeting to buying a house, we're here to provide you with all the information that you have been looking for from top experts in their fields. And remember, if you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and toss us a follow on social media. On this episode of Making Your Money Work, we're joined by the chief side hustler, an entrepreneur, an author, a content creator, a man with all sorts of different hats that he wears every single day, Nick Loper, also the founder, I guess we can say, of SideHustleNation.com. Nick, really appreciate you taking some time on this afternoon to chat with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Now let's start with your background and how you kind of got into the whole the king of the side hustles, for lack of a better phrase. What was your background and kind of how did you get started down this side hustle route?
Man, I mean, how far back should we go? The shorter version of it is the blog and podcast at SideHustleNation.com started in 2013 on the side from the primary business that I was running at the time, which was my original side hustle. That was a footwear comparison shopping site. Like, where can I find the best deal on my next pair of shoes? That site was the vehicle that let me quit my corporate job. So 3 years of nights and weekends working on that in my spare time, and finally felt confident to give my notice at work. And it was while running that full time that, really just as a side project experiment, started the blog and the podcast. And within a year and a half, the Side Hustle Show was the main focus. And I don't know if the revenue fully justified it at that point yet, but it was, you could kind of see where it was headed. So it was an exciting transition.
Your first side hustle, you mentioned it, the shoe comparison. How did that all develop, and what was your mindset developing that side hustle while still working a full-time corporate job?
It's such a random niche, right? I'm not a sneakerhead. I didn't particularly care about the product, but it started from an internship that I had in college, which was with this, one of these pioneering online footwear retailers in Seattle, where I went to school. And it was a brick and mortar shoe store that had, in 1996, like the wild and crazy idea to put some of their inventory online. And by the time I came on board years later, like that part of their business had grown so much faster. And so I was, as a marketing intern, I was put in charge of a lot of their pay-per-click advertising, their affiliate program. It was my first exposure to really e-commerce and SEO and all this stuff. And so that was really cool. And after that internship ended, having seen a little bit of the inside of how their affiliate program works, like, well, maybe I could turn around and become an affiliate of theirs. And so joined their program, joined the programs of a handful of other different shoe companies, and started running like direct link pay-per-click ads. So if you searched like a specific model of shoes into Google, my ad might show up, and I would send you directly to whoever I thought had the best deal on those shoes. The problem through my affiliate link, so it could track the referrals. The downside to that, it was like tedious to manage. Like stuff would go out of stock or like prices would change. And so my theory was if I could build a database, build a site with like everybody's inventory, like I wouldn't have to worry about the prices changing. Like the database would update automatically and, be fewer, I don't know. My theory was it would be easier to manage. And as long as it had shoes in the domain name, in the URL, like that would be more compelling to click on than Nextag or Price Grabber or some of like the big comparison shopping competitors at that time. So that was the idea behind shoesrus.net was the original version of that site. So let that be a moral. Like spend more than 5 minutes thinking of a domain name.
As you were building that side hustle, trying to maintain your corporate life, for lack of a better phrase, what were the biggest challenges for you, or what was the toughest thing for you?
So the advantage was that I had a couple of unique things working in my favor. So first, the company that I was working for moved me to the other side of the country, so found myself without a ton of friends outside of work. So I had a lot of free times, especially evenings, weekday evenings, where it's like, okay, I come home, and then like really, after going to the gym and making dinner and stuff, it was like 7 to 10 was pretty reliably, side hustle time for me. So that was something that was working in my favor. The other advantage was, with an online business, like I didn't need to be there during the day, and theoretically, like these ads in the website could serve people and make sales like without my direct involvement, which was really cool. The downside was like I might be, theoretically like off the grid. This is kind of like pre-smartphone days, for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. And like if the website crashed, as it sometimes did, like spending this money on ads, pointing people to a website that was down. And so that was a little bit stressful trying to manage that and like not wanting to waste money on ads advertising a broken site and trying to do all the maintenance and stuff required.
So as you transferred from that into kind of where you are now and with Side Hustle Nation, we'll talk kind of more about Side Hustle Nation itself. How has this changed the way that you look at, quote, side hustles, or the way that you look at what you've done yourself in your background?
I don't know. I think like every experience is a positive one in that like you take something away from that. One of the biggest shifts for me was, trying to figure out a way out of this corporate life. And so, or, looking at 30 years of climbing the corporate ladder, like that didn't appeal to me. So like, okay, I got to figure out an alternative. And it was, okay, if I can cover my, monthly fixed expenses, and that was kind of the metric that I was shooting for. Is like, I want to have a track record of revenue, 6 months, 12 months, like whatever it is, to cover my monthly expenses. And then with an extra 40, 50 hours a week that I was devoting to the day job, like I'm pretty confident I could replace the salary and beyond. And that was the big shift for me, or at least that was what finally made me comfortable saying like, you know what, I don't need this job anymore. See you guys later.
So as you got started, did you, just trying to correct me if I'm wrong. So as you got started, you kind of looked at it as covering certain expenses at a time was how you broke it down before you decided that, okay, you were safe to go.
Yeah. And it was like, you celebrate the little baby step milestones. Like when I was very first getting started, I could make $200 in a month, like on these direct link ads. And I was like, I was still in college at that time. Like, this is fantastic. Like, that's like half my rent, And then it got up like during the holiday season that first year, it was like, more than covering my full rent. And I was like, this is awesome. This is like my first taste of like passive income. Never, in quotes, because like never mind all the upfront work that went into it, But I was like, this is really cool. And it was kind of empowering. And then the way to shift that going forward is to kind of think of the concept of a side hustle snowball, where you've itemized out your monthly expenses, and because everybody wants to like replace their rent, replace their mortgage, and like that's awesome. But could you start out by replacing your cell phone bill, or your car payment, or your insurance, or your gym membership, or your like Dollar Shave Club, or these little things that kind of add up? Like, could you erase those line item expenses with extra income? Could you make those free? That's really exciting for me. Like, as you kind of start to build your way up towards those bigger line items, the rent, the mortgage.
for you, what was like the most exciting expense when you finally got it covered and you kind of took that baby step? What was, just for you personally, what was the most exciting one?
For me, I remember, so I was living in Atlanta at the time, and it was like the first month the business had made $1,000, and my mortgage was like $700 on this condo, plus like, random food expenses. And I was traveling a lot for work as a young single guy, so I didn't have a ton of expenses outside of that, and had a company car and stuff. So it was like $1,000, and it was that moment of realization that like the entire day job salary is gravy. Like I don't need it. Like the business is like covering everything that I need. Like that was so cool. And I think that's a really empowering position to approach work from, because it's like, if this ever starts to not be interesting or fun or challenging, like I don't need this job anymore. And that's kind of eventually what happened. It was like, you know what? I don't need to be here anymore. So I'm having much more fun. It's more rewarding to go do this other thing.
As you look at the way that side hustles have developed and kind of become almost like the in thing per se over the last couple of years, what are some of the traps that you've kind of seen people falling into with these side hustles and with thinking maybe that they can take off from their normal 9 to 5?
Sure. So it definitely has become definitely a bigger part of the popular lexicon, and I've benefited from that as more people have started typing that into Google and trying to do some research on that. A couple things to consider. The first is, why do you want to pursue this? Because you could be spending your free time, watching Netflix or hanging out at the pool. Like there's so many other things that you could be doing, and if you don't have a strong enough why behind trying to start a side hustle, the first sign of stress or challenge, like it's easy to give up. It's like I don't need this in my life anyways. Like it's fine. Like, I'm pretty comfortable the way that I am. So like, why do you want to do that? For me, the idea of, not having to spend my next 30 years climbing that corporate ladder, like that was really a driving force for me. Today, it's, really motivating to, help and serve people in this community. Like people will send me notes and I'll meet people at conferences like, hey, I read your post on this, or I heard your podcast on this. I made $1,000 doing that last month. Like, whoa, like that is crazy awesome. Like, making a ripple effect impact on the world. That's really cool. We've got a couple young kids, so like trying to think about how to raise them to have a more entrepreneurial mindset than the way that I was raised was like, get good grades, go to school, get a job. That was like kind of the defined path. So that stuff is really motivating. And then the other thing is having the willingness, and maybe not the desire, because some like failure is really glorified. So not necessarily the desire to fail, but like the willingness to try something out, like an experimenter's mindset, to go through and say like, okay, I'm going to test this out. Does it work? Does it not?
In that vein, what were some, or were there some that you tried out that you kind of look back on and you're like, yeah, that didn't nearly work out as well as I thought it was going to?
Oh my gosh, lots of stuff. So on the back of the shoe business, so I'd go to these affiliate marketing conferences, and a lot of my advertising partners or retail partners also sold like handbags and luggage. Like for whatever reason, like that was like a common complementary product. And so I was like, oh, I could start a site, selling handbags and luggage, and I actually did that, using a lot of the same back end code, but still cost like $5,000 to develop this new front end skin and systems for all this stuff. And then had I done just a tiny little bit more research, I would have learned like the commission rates were lower pretty much across the board. The product naming conventions were so inconsistent. So it was like really hard to draw up good comparison pages for that niche. The breadth of stores covering these products was so much more. So like I had 20 or 30 different shoe stores and could reasonably cover like 95% of the global internet inventory. With the handbags and luggage, it was like 100 stores, and you'd have to churn through all this data. It was just, it was this big lesson of like, you need to do a little bit more research up front rather than thinking like, hey, lightning struck once, maybe I can make this happen in another niche. Another failure was trying to start like a wine related site. And this is kind of like a transition into a more content driven site. The problem was I didn't know anything about wine. I still don't know anything about wine. Like it was just regurgitated kind of Me Too content with no personality. It was just, a site that didn't need to exist. And for that reason, nobody ever clicked on it. So it's just kind of like a waste of time. But I guess I'll caveat that and say not necessarily a waste of time, because it was during the research for that site I stumbled on another idea or another niche that has actually worked out pretty well. But it's just, I don't know, thinking the reason for this thing to exist and trying to will something into existence that's actually helpful for people.
You also mentioned you've had people, come up to you and say, I made X amount of money doing this or that. What are some things that you've had people talk to you about, or things you've come across that people are able to do to make that extra money that maybe aren't on someone's radar? The driving for Uber, or I guess charging the electric scooters now. It seems like those are all kind of mainstream ideas a lot of people think of, but what are some of those lesser thought of ideas that you've seen people have success with?
So another one, I guess this is pretty popular, but would just be like the buy low, sell high business model. My favorite story of this type is like the flea market flipper and his wife in Tampa, Florida, or outside of Orlando or someplace, Central Florida. This is the same business model as every store ever. They just happen to be selling used goods, stuff they find on the cheap, random stuff. He's always, one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram, because they're always posting like, hey, we found this and we flipped it for $500, or we found this in the dumpster and we sold it for $200. Just like, they're awesome, low startup cost, something that anybody can do type of business. A couple other surprising ones that I want to share. One is a mobile notary service or loan signing service where, I don't know if are you a homeowner? I
am not.
Okay. I'm not either. So I'm not like downplaying that, but we did used to own. And when we did, the escrow company sent over somebody to like oversee us and like explain like this giant stack of mortgage documents. Hey, you're signing your life away. Like, here's what's going on here. And that person got paid probably $150 for that hour-long appointment. And so like this mobile notary service is an interesting one that's come up. It's actually been a really popular one on the Side Hustle show. We could probably add to the show notes on like, hey, I didn't know this was a thing. And then all of a sudden now I'm making $1,500 a month on the side from my day job, just taking these appointments in the evening. So that's an interesting one. Another one that comes to mind is just the online course sales model. And of course, to sell an online course, you need an offer. So you need to have the product, and you need to have an audience, or you need to have a source of traffic. One of the most compelling sources of traffic has been kind of a YouTube demo video. I talked to a guy this is Nate Dodson, who sells a course on how to start a microgreens farming business. Completely random niche that I'd never heard of. He had done this himself and was making, I don't know, $1,000 a month, like selling microgreen, like super nutrient dense radish roots or something, like selling them at the farmer's market, selling them to local restaurants and stuff. And so he just put up a video of like, here's my growing system in my garage. Here's how it works. Funneled people into this course eventually through his email list and everything. And he was selling like 40 or 50 grand a month worth of this course on how to start a microgreens business, like on the back of just a handful of YouTube videos in this little funnel that he'd set up on his site. I was like, this is insane. Like, if you have a specific skill, even if you're not the only person in the world to do that thing, like other people want to know what you know. And that was really eye-opening to me.
As you've had people come to you and share their story with you or talk to you and seek for advice, what are some tips that you give to someone who's looking to find that, whether it's side hustle that they can turn full time or just side hustle to help them earn some money to cover some bills?
Yeah, so we talked about, knowing your why or your motivation behind it. We talked about adopting kind of an experimenter's mindset, this like willingness to try something out even if you don't know the outcome. The other thing that might come to mind is the other thing that a lot of people ask about is like, do I need to start a business around my passion? And I don't love that idea for a couple of reasons. It's like, number one, you might not have a passion, and that becomes a really stressful thing. Like, well, what am I passionate about? Like, I'm interested in a lot of things. I don't know if anything is my undying passion. And then the other piece of that is I've talked to people who like, oh, I was really passionate about music. I made that my business and I lost my passion. It became a job, it became work, and I no longer loved it. And so it's like there may be a risk there. What we found instead, and this is backed up by some research from Cal Newport and Dan Pink, where if you do the work, the passion often follows. Like, for example, I had zero passion for podcasting when I started. I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't even know anything about it. But 6.5 years later, I'm super passionate about podcasting because it's become a part of my weekly identity in producing the show. So passion normally follows doing the work. So what you could do instead of asking like, well, what am I passionate about? You can ask, what am I interested in? How would I spend my spare time? What did I love to do as a kid? What do I never get tired about talking about? What do people come and ask me for help with already? Like, what am I a perceived expert in already? And then you kind of start to bubble up, hopefully, some business ideas or service ideas from there.
And we're going to wrap it up on that note. Nick Loper, if someone wants to connect with you, where can they find you? Where can they get caught up with everything you've got going on?
Fine. Of course, would love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show, available in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you find your podcasts. And if you hit up SideHustleNation.com/ideas, that's where you'll find my constantly updated laundry list of part-time business ideas that you can start today.
Nick Loper, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Now, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, make sure to click that subscribe button and leave a rating and let us know how we're doing, what we can do to help you, and what topics you want to hear. Additionally, if there's someone you think would be a great interview for the podcast, make sure to follow us on social media and let us know. We at Sqwire are here to help you, so don't be afraid to reach out no matter what question or issue you're running into. We look forward to hearing from you and talking to you on social media.